It's taken more than 1 million bricks, 150 contractors and several years of planning for this furnace, which will replace 2 structures that have certainly reached their expiry dates.
Having that replaced and repaired gives us now the opportunity to continue on our operation, actually increase if possible.
The structure will be used to make anodes, which are an important ingredient in the aluminium making process. It's designed to use gas more efficiently and at full capacity will produce up to 350 anodes every day. The upgrade of the furnace is the first step in a planned major overhaul of the smelter, which will include a $20 million upgrade for the casting department.
The products that we used to produce are no longer really the market choice, and so we've now gone into a foundry product which is far more acceptable to the marketplace, and that meant an upgrade and also an improvement in our performance.
While productivity is expected to be boosted greatly, 64 full-time jobs will be lost over the next 2 years, halving the workforce in that department. Employees have been offered voluntary redundancies as well as assistance with reskilling so that they can find new jobs. 2 jobs will be axed next month, with a further 16 to go before the end of the year. Colleen West, NBN News.
For Josh Ross, packing an overnight bag has become second nature, especially given the itinerary he's kept over the past 12 months. Athens, Adelaide and Tasmania among his adventures. Now Perth is calling, where he'll line up for his second Grand Prix series, keeping company with the likes of Matt Shervington.
Well, I haven't actually beaten him before, so to come up against him will be, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully I can put together a good run.
That, he says, will see the race won in the first 60 metres, something the 23-year-old and his coach have been working on over the New Year period.
Just getting the extra power and strength just to come out of the blocks a bit harder, because at Athens they gain away from me at after the 60 metre mark.
A World Championship berth beckons, and the Grand Prix series will determine whether he's made the cut for the 100-metre sprint. For Ross, though, it's not if, but when.
A qualifier is 10:21, and I've ran a 10:22 in Athens, so I'm quite capable of running underneath that, and I feel stronger than I did at Athens, so yeah, feeling good at the moment.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News. They don't look much like your regular woodchopper. Then again, there's nothing average about Leanne Kime and Natalie Sargent. With plenty of wood lying around, would you believe Leanne and her husband don't even own a fireplace? Is it a good incentive to buy one?
Yeah, I'd say so. Definitely. We get people come around and we give it away. So it's going to the dump with it.
The pile of offcuts, though, is testament to Leanne's dedication, practising in her backyard for more than a decade to become a top-rate woodchopper, also known as a sawyer.
I sawed with my brother 11 years ago at Newcastle Show while his wife was pregnant, and my husband was a football player, and then we just decided that it was a good sport to take up and something that we could do together.
For dental nurse Natalie Sargent, the love affair began much later, but it's one which burns just as bright. She's also made the cut as a reserve, having enjoyed success with her fiancé on the national circuit.
We've won a fair few times up at Brisbane Show. We hold the quickest record up there for Jack and Jill soaring. Leanne and I have won it a few times, Jill and Jill.
The team will complete a tour of New Zealand, locked with the Kiwis in a trans-Tasman battle before the all-important Royal Easter Show. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
If you're thinking of building a duplex-style home like this on a bushland reserve in Port Stephens, think again. This is the growing pile of development applications held up for more than a year because the Rural Fire Service won't sign off on them. Since these homes were built, the RFS has gained the power to approve or disapprove subdivisions on or near bushland. The smallest form of a subdivision is a duplex. The row is over who'll pay to maintain the 30-metre clearing now required by the RFS between new homes and the bush.
Bureaucrats in the Rural Fire Service suggesting that we maintain it forever, that we accept full liability, and that's not really something we can impose on the ratepayers of the future.
And all we've asked them to do is give us some surety that that's going to be maintained into the future. Council, however, is refusing to do that, which leaves us in the position of not being able to provide that adequate protection for these people who may build that house in the future.
Regardless of which body ends up paying to keep the bush clear, the short-term losers are those trying to build a new duplex, hit with frustrating delays while the two bureaucracies slug it out. Paul Lobb, NBN News. The newly developed resort is a world away from its cheeky past. Upmarket and secluded, it's the latest business venture undertaken by Port Stephens Council.
You wouldn't recognise the place. Gone is the lantana, gone are all the old style humpies.
The humpies have made way for these villas that will set you back $270 a night in peak season. The first stage of the resort is still fairly basic for the price, but the beach is only a short walk through the dunes and there are plans to add further attractions.
Money invested so far, including the purchase, we're up to around about the $6.5 million mark. We've still got another couple of million to go. But we're over the big stuff. We've done all the infrastructure and all the civil works, so it's just a matter of more accommodation, a conference centre and restaurant, and ultimately another pool.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It's going to be very, very useful for us from now on, because in this area we've had no official landing site up until now.
The placards told the story. Novocastrians, at least the majority of them, support refugees living in our community. Around 200 people attended a pro-refugee rally at the Hamilton Clock Tower today. Another couple of hundred packed out the Palais in Hunter Street.
The Newcastle community has thoroughly endorsed the fact that we welcome people to this area, we embrace multiculturalism and all the benefits that flow from it.
It was all in response to a public meeting planned by a group called the Concerned Citizens Collective, who had distributed race-hate propaganda to homes in Wickham and Islington. The group's ringleader, right-wing extremist Dr Jim Salem, addressed a meagre crowd of 15 at Islington Park.
I think Australia is importing a social disaster.
Tempers ran high as refugee supporters questioned Salem's ideals before the man and those backing him were driven from the park. The Sudanese community was humbled by the encouragement.
We know that we've got a very large support in the community, and that's why we take these things very easy and we're not really upset about it.
A fire believed to have started in the downstairs unit ripped through the heritage-listed terrace on King Street late last night. The occupant of the upstairs unit was lucky to escape with her life.
Got halfway down the steps. Got halfway down the stairs. Realised I couldn't get out because of the big thick smoke. I was panicking and shaking, and I had a guy from the pub up the road here who came and rescued me. He ended up throwing me over the fence, which is why I've got a sprained ankle.
The fire also gutted the top floor of the neighbouring building. Neighbours say a man had been living in the downstairs unit.
People have been here looking for him over the last couple of weeks. They haven't been living there for the last month.
Police are not ruling out arson.
The cause of the fire is undetermined. We're treating it as suspicious.
The support from Newcastle's music community was sensational. Around 80 acts donated their time for the homegrown Aid for Asia concert. It was just the turnout that let the event down. This afternoon there were only about 100 people watching performances on 4 stages, but that didn't deter bands like Common Code and Dirty Pink Jeans from putting on an impressive show.
Newcastle sort of is trying to do its bit. I mean, every city in Australia, big city in Australia will do something big, and this is sort of what we can do.
Organisers had hoped the event would raise up to $150,000 for tsunami victims, and while the final figure is unlikely to be that high, any money will help those rebuilding their lives in the affected Asian countries.
They'll be receiving all of the money, all the money from the ticket sales, and all of the money from the raffles, the silent raffles, and anything else we can raise.
Further in town, there was another group of Novocastrians doing their bit for charity this weekend. 16 artists donated works for the 3rd World Aid Art Exhibition at John Painter Gallery. The proceeds of all sales will benefit a range of charities. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
This Cameron Park site is earmarked for a $120 million subdivision that would include residential lots for almost 600 houses. Last night, Lake Macquarie Council delayed making a decision on it and the first stage of the North Wallara Peninsula development.
Am I happy? No, obviously I'd like things to progress reasonably, but as I say, in the scheme of things, it's better for people to be fully informed in what we're deciding and be confident in our decision.
Council's environmental officer says the creation of the Pambulong Forest Estate would threaten 4 endangered species and wipe out vast tracts of a protected flowering shrub. Council's subdivision engineer argues that nearby is superior bushland which will never be developed, and the subdivision would proceed so slowly that the wildlife could move out. Meantime, the North Wallara development is on hold because the estate plan has a new road design and Council is concerned about the cost of upkeep for the streets. Lake Macquarie's mayor says delaying making a decision on the 2 developments will give councillors more time to study reports as well as visiting the sites. Mayor Piper is optimistic Council will make a ruling within a month. Christine Tondorf, NBN News. This is one of a fleet of boats used by the state's Maritime Authority to clean Sydney Harbour. And it seems that anything good enough for the harbour city is good enough for the hunter. Lake Macquarie councillor Rob O'Brien says Australia's biggest saltwater lake is fast filling up with rubbish, and it's time it was cleaned up.
We've got star pickets, we've got tyres, trees, garbage bags, buckets, you name it. In fact, even rail lines sitting out there in the lake bed.
Mr O'Brien says council has limited funds for cleaning up the foreshore. Litter in the area near the Warners Bay shops is only picked up 4 times a year. The New South Wales Maritime Authority controls the lake's water and the Lands Department controls the seabed. But Mr O'Brien says they do little to keep the lake clean.
There's no ongoing maintenance program for the lake itself, and whilst, for example, Sydney Harbour, I'm led to believe, has something like 12 vessels that can be involved in a clean-up, Lake Macquarie has none, and we believe it's time that changed.
Mr O'Brien wants the council to lobby the state government to finance a clean-up staff of 2 and a vessel.
These are some of the men and women who've been the eyes for the Royal Australian Air Force during recent operations in Iraq and the tsunami crisis. A new commander was appointed to head the country's 2,100-strong surveillance and response group, which is in charge of the RAF's air traffic control, air defence and maritime control aircraft in Australia and overseas. Air Commodore Tim Owen today assumed his command at a ceremonial parade with all the trimmings. Air Commodore Owen comes to the Williamtown RAF base with 28 years' experience, his most recent posting in London as Australia's air advisor. He welcomes the challenges that await him.
With all of the equipment that's coming in the next couple of years with the Wedgetail AW&C capability, new command and control systems and new radars, it's a pretty important time for us to get that right.
Former Air Commodore Graham Bentley will head to Washington to take up position of Australian Air Attaché. Colleen West, NBN News.
One in 6 school-aged children suffers from asthma, and for reasons which largely remain a mystery, there's often a spike in symptoms at this time of year.
It may be related to going into classrooms that have been closed down over the summer period. I think that there's a big possibility that they're exposed to new viruses.
Whatever the reason, it can result in more emergency department visits and even hospitalisation for some young sufferers. The asthma peaks are variable. The last occurred in 2001.
We're probably due for another peak this year. It seems to come in 2 or 3 yearly cycles.
Dr Whitehead says parents need to be alert and ensure their child is following an asthma management plan.
To make sure that they're assessing the child's asthma, making sure they know what to do if the child gets increased symptoms.
Meantime, the John Hunter Children's Hospital is working on a better understanding of asthma's mysteries, currently calling for volunteers between 7 and 17 to take part in several research projects. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
This 160-strong fleet of blue, yellow and white buses has become a regular sight at schools and bus stops in Port Stephens, Maitland, Cessnock and Newcastle. While it was business as usual today, Blue Ribbon Buses is chartering new territory following news its parent company, Bosniak Holdings, has failed to renegotiate a loan with its major financier. Sydney firm Deloitte has been appointed voluntary administrator, and today the company reaffirmed its commitment to retaining Blue Ribbon's 260 employees. There will be no disruption to bus services across the Hunter. The administrators are working to ensure there will be no job losses, and they'll continue to operate the company until a buyer is found. The Managing Director of Bosniak Holdings says all entitlements will be met and trade creditors paid. The state government says it will also work alongside the administrators to ensure employee security. Late this afternoon, administrators were locked in meetings with representatives from the Transport Workers Union who have expressed concern that jobs may be lost. Colleen West, NBN News. The first day at school can be a daunting one, but for triplets Annika, Lizette and Matthew and their parents, today couldn't come soon enough.
Happy. Over the moon. Been waiting for it for ages.
It's just been such a busy 5.5 years, just time to ourselves, relax, feet up, 5 days a week.
There were few signs of first day nerves, this ready-made team of playmates guiding each other through unfamiliar ground. And with a big brother close by, the transition from preschool is sure to be a smooth one. Some got more than they bargained for in the playground, while in the classroom it was straight down to business.
Play home corner, puzzles, gluing.
And tell me some of the friends that you've made today.
I've got all of them now.
Meanwhile, it was a real family affair for some this afternoon, with both mum and dad eager to hear all about the big day in the classroom. Colleen West, NBN News.
The NBN Soccer League is home to a high level of country competition and some gifted footballers, but can 1, 2 or even 3 players from its ranks take the next step? That's the question being asked by the Newcastle United Jets. For the first time in its history, Newcastle United has scheduled trial matches to give local blokes the ultimate opportunity.
We would encourage the local players to put their best foot forward, and there's nothing more than we'd like to see than one of the boys get a shot at a contract with the Jets.
Through the Northern New South Wales Soccer Federation, the Jets have invited NBN League clubs to nominate players for the 3 trial matches. Each club can put 4 players forward, with 2 to be younger than 19.
We want to see successful northern guys playing for the Jets.
Let's face it, we expect people from this region to come and watch us play. So we should support our own region or give them the opportunity at least.
The United Jets have already signed 13 players and are confident another 4 have been secured. That leaves 3 spots which may or may not be snapped up by Hunter Valley players. Hand-picked footballers from a list of 127 interstate and overseas applicants will play against the locals during the trial matches on February the 12th, 13th and 16th. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
16% of the valley between Muswellbrook and Singleton has been mined for coal. That's some 220 square kilometres of open-cut mine, around the size of the Newcastle local government area. While more than a quarter of the land has been rehabilitated, there are still vast tracts of tailings and salt-poisoned soil. Sites that were mined before laws making bush regeneration mandatory for mining companies.
Well, if the government's got all this extra money, it's one thing to say it's the mining company's job to do it because they're taking the resources out of there. But some of those companies have moved on. If we've got the extra money, then it's only going to take a small amount to come back in.
Just a few million of the government's mining royalties bonanza would go a long way in the Shire, according to the Mayor. He'd like to see commercial forests grown on old mine sites to create a future industry for the day when mining leaves Singleton. And the town has other needs.
If we want to raise special money, such as we did 2 years ago to build a new library, to fix up much overdue drainage problems that we had in town and to do some streetscape improvements, we had to go to the government cap in hand.
The Mineral Resources Minister rejects any criticism of the way mining royalties are spent, saying they go in the state coffer and the Carr government is spending big on infrastructure in the Hunter. Christine Tondorf, NBN News.
Just as he does in the show, the Music Man made a spectacular entrance, prancing down the platform. Opera Hunter's upcoming production of the musical classic promises plenty. But Professor Harold Hill is not to be trusted.
He's a bit of a con man. He's come into town to basically rip the parents off and form a boys band, but he falls in love.
The show will hit the stage in late April. The cast of David Williamson's latest production, Flatfoot, were also in appropriate surroundings today, casting creative eyes over the Civic Theatre. The play, set in ancient Rome, tells of the struggles of a comic playwright, but it's no picnic for the actors either. Between them, the cast of 3 play 15 characters. Drew Forsyth has 10 alone.
From the old fella, who lives next door, really dumb guy, who doesn't know what's going on under his nose, and a pompous general, and a whole bunch of characters.
It runs from March 3.
It's been a case of trial and error for the Hunter olive industry during the past decade, battling conditions that aren't ideal for growing, such as high humidity. Growers have also been experimenting with harvest times to ensure they get good oil percentages and a product that's pleasing to the tongue. And while growers have experienced some hail and pest damage this season, we can still expect to see about 200 tonnes of the fruit coming off the region's trees. That will amount to about 35,000 litres of oil and 10 tonnes of table fruit.
Olive trees don't really hit their full maturity till they're about 15, 20 years. Well, we're now getting to that 10, 12 years of age, so they're coming into serious production.
Compared with other olive growing regions in Australia, the Hunter is still relatively small, with just 200 growers and 250,000 trees. The Australian olive industry predicts global production will fall in coming years, opening up new opportunities for the nation's growers. And while a handful of Hunter producers are already looking to export, Mr Wilson says most will continue to sell locally.
We still import considerably more than we produce ourselves, so replacing imported oil has always been the main game, is push the European stuff out, we can produce our own.
Harvest is expected to begin in late March.
You'd be forgiven for thinking the state election was 2 weeks away, not 2 years. Bob Carr was in Maitland today opening the $35 million Department of Mineral Resources building, while opposition leader John Brogden blew into the region yesterday with an election promise to help fund the Lifeline organisation under a state Liberal government. All just a few days after 3 local Labor MPs spoke out in the press, voicing concerns about Labor's re-election chances. But the Premier is quick to shrug off any talk of a swing.
There's no swing away from Labor in the Hunter. There's precisely no poll, and the only published poll about state voting intentions to appear was one that showed a rise in Labor Party support.
You've got Labor backbenchers who've been members of the party in most cases for all of their life, who are very critical of Bob Carr and making it very clear that their jobs are on the line because of this government's poor performance.
The 8 state seats in the Hunter are all held by Labor, and long-serving Labor men like Maitland MP John Price says the ALP dissenters should work harder to win votes instead of whinging.
I'm disappointed that my colleagues see things the way they do. If that's a reflection of their community, then they should be out and about and making sure it changes.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Hopefully by the end of the month would be good, and working on things pretty well, so pretty happy with the progression in talks.
I'm a slim chance to start the season, but I'm not going to rush it this time. I'm going to wait till it's 100%.
I've just actually finished my degree in sports administration, so you never know, maybe I'll be back here one day receiving a sports admin award.
It comes along with results and it comes along with great characters, and I think we've got all three right here in Petrea Thomas. So congratulations once again, and thanks for the great ride.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Petrea Thomas, our New South Wales Athlete of the Year, and please put your hands together for all our other athletes, our winners, our finalists. I'm standing over here because these guys are the main part of the show. I'm going to say goodnight to you now. We're going to leave you with some fantastic images courtesy of Channel 7. So thank you for your patience throughout the evening, and thanks for your wonderful support. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next year. And congratulations once more to all our finalists, our winners, and of course Petrea Thomas. Thank you.
The University of Newcastle says childhood obesity is a big problem. In the next 6 months, it hopes to tell us something we don't already know: how to fix the situation.
It has been established that overweight is a significant problem, but we're not really sure what is the best solution to that.
Health and physical education lecturer Dr. Philip Morgan will head a study aimed at the 30% of Hunter children who are overweight. It will be the first that tries to identify the best combination of physical activity and nutrition to help obese children lose weight. Kids aged between 6 and 9 will be put through fundamental sports skills training at the Forum Gym, while their parents are lectured about healthy diet modifications. 10 weeks later, the children's health will be reassessed.
And then hopefully we'll be able to see some significant improvements in their children's weight profile, also in their self-esteem, confidence, and a range of other spin-off effects from that.
Parents who have an overweight child and would like to be involved in the program can contact the university on 4921 5644. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
There was a notable absence in the Knights lineup this afternoon as the side gathered for training, the missing player Dane Tilse. And while coach Michael Hagan supports the board's swift decision to sack Tilse, his absence was felt by all members of the team.
I do feel a fair bit of sadness for Dane Tilse, given the fact that he's been at this football club for 4 or 5 years, and we see him with a good future in the game.
The Knights' next major hurdle is securing their new major naming rights sponsor. They've revealed that the prospective sponsor, which was to be named this week, is now having reservations.
It certainly hasn't helped. The deal wasn't signed off, and our major sponsor, who I'm not prepared to name, we will be having further discussions with. I guess we've been served with what I would call a show cause notice.
According to Knights management, the 11 other players, which have copped a $50,000 fine, returned to their hotel for the 3 a.m. curfew, but headed back out to the university campus at 5 a.m. The incident has called into question whether there should be a player alcohol ban for away games and whether the 3 a.m. curfew was strict enough.
By the time the game's over, they cool down, shower, change, eat, find out where they're going. It's not all that long a time.
The pre-season match, which the Knights lost, finished at 9:30 p.m, giving players 5.5 hours until their curfew. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Flying out from Newcastle Airport tonight, the Pirates have been on cloud nine ever since beating Wollongong and claiming a playoff spot last week. As a coach, Adrian Hurley has never missed them, and he doesn't intend to bow out early in Brisbane tomorrow night either.
I've always felt if I didn't make the top four, then personally it was a failure for me. So I've told these guys that if we get knocked out in the playoffs, then I put it personally, I take that as a failure.
It will be up to his players on the night and a watertight defence against the Bullets.
Everybody seems focused. We know what we're capable of at this point, where we are physically, and we want to go in there and get the job done.
There's no denying the Pirates are in form, coming off Friday night's massive 27-point victory against the West Sydney Razorbacks. But that was in Newcastle. The big question now is, after a disappointing season on the road, can the Pirates come up with a win in Brisbane?
The biggest concern I have is that all our players must turn up to play on the road, and this year, for different reasons, we haven't always had everyone ready to play on the road, and that's a personal thing they've got to come over.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
Never before had so much hinged on one player's return. Outside of his club's obvious need for its captain, rugby league in general needed a good news story. And while they held their collective breath, the man himself was wrestling with his own injury demons. Anxiously starting off the bench, it was hardly the start he was after. Timing was askew, mistakes were made and points were conceded.
Pretty rusty early, as everyone's seen. I was a bit all over the shop, but once I got into the game, it felt good.
As the game wore on, confidence grew as his return gathered momentum. Step by step, the Johns of old began shining through. With deft running and selective passing, slowly he silenced the doubters and revived hope in both the club and code, thirsting for it.
The first game, any season you have self-doubt, but coming back from a major injury like mine at my age, obviously there's more doubts in your head, and obviously there's a lot of people like to tell you that too, so just great to get it out of the way. I'm over the moon.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. All the hype at Gosford may have surrounded Andrew John's return, but it was the incumbent Test halfback who stole the show early. Feeding on a glut of possession, Brett Kamali led the Sharks' attack, who held a 26-6 lead not long into the second half. But inspired by a captain growing more confident as the game went on, Johns directed a 3-try blitz that got the Knights within 4. He almost got them home, but Johns knows his game will return over time.
It's a good base, but I can definitely improve a lot from there.
A favourite in Newcastle and the rest of the country, when Costas Yu made it into centre ring last night, no one wanted him to leave. He headlined a prominent list of Australian boxers on hand to watch the main bout, which pitted Paraguayan Oscar Samundio against the hometown champ, Chad Bennett. With his WBF World Welterweight belt on the line, Bennett went on the front foot early as he searched for ways through the visitors' defence. He tagged the South American early, who met the canvas in the opening round, before he made a second visit in an effort that left even him blushing. But while the man they call Hollywood was keen to put on a show, Samundio tried turning things into a wrestle, but by round 6 he was copping too much punishment for his corner to bear and they threw in the towel. The Paraguayan needed it way after the fight as well, as Bennett reclaimed his belt for the second time. Earlier in the night, local heavyweight Pat Kennedy finished a short but entertaining bout in which both fighters tumbled early, before only he was left standing.
There wasn't a spare seat at Newcastle's Sacred Heart Cathedral on this Easter Sunday morning, the region's Catholic community united to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, while across town, the morning brought joy for Newcastle's Anglican population at Christchurch Cathedral. With a ray of light shining on the altar, the church's message was for people to be optimistic in a troubled world. But some, well, their mind may have been elsewhere. And fair enough, at 11 o'clock, 2,500 children anxiously lined up for the inaugural Newcastle City Church Easter egg hunt. It should have been called the Egg Scramble. Bodies went on the line for 10,000 precious plastic eggs. On closer inspection, they contained chocolates and prizes. For some kids, though, the prizes were skateboards, CD players and even a bike. The big turnout means it will be an annual egg hunt.
Next year's going to be 20,000 eggs, double what we've got now, so we're just really excited about that.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
It's no secret that without the backing of a licensed club, no NRL team requires sponsorship and big home crowds more than Newcastle. Sales of seating in their home ground's new grandstand has helped generate steady income. But a failed bid to lure electronics company Gizmondo on a reported $2 million deal has left lingering doubts for the longer term.
Look, it has to be a concern when you don't have a major sponsor, but you don't get them overnight. I think we've only had 5 in 18 years, and it's a constant process and it's hard work, but we'll get one.
Reports today the NRL may prop Newcastle up should they not doesn't faze a club which has long lived with speculation over its bottom line. Talks of the pending signature of Danny Badiris to a 4-year deal, though, is worth consideration.
Michael Hagan, our coach, has spoken to Danny. They're hopeful of wrapping it up very quickly.
Also under review, just how the hooker's most recent injury concerns over a shoulder and elbow was seemingly overlooked. Expected to return this week after a foot operation, Badiris will instead go under the knife again on Tuesday and miss up to another 6 weeks.
We thought we're on top of most issues, and this one did blindside us a bit, yes.
The national meeting is a sacred event held in different regions each year. Today, Sandgate was where the revered sports car was worshipped. 464 Australian and overseas MG lovers have followed their hearts to the Hunter.
We've spent 3 years organising this event, and this year we've been blessed to have people from Hawaii, South Africa and people from England.
Part of a busy schedule was the Motorcana. There's no doubt all the machines look good, but today was about performance. MGs are often associated with style and prestige. Today, raw grunt was another description. Newer models like the MG-F screamed around the obstacle course to be quickest to stop the clock. Tomorrow we'll see an MG hill climb near Raymond Terrace and an observation run to the Hunter Vineyards. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
Going to be a night to test the referee's patience, with Grant Coleman given a rest. Wyon captain Troy Pizzette led the home side's charge, sending Denny Somerville try-bound to wrestle back the lead. Rowan Kelly then sliced through South's right edge before combining with Matt Ross to extend the buffer to 6. A bit of luck doesn't hurt either, and the ball definitely bounced Wyong's way, not once, but twice in this attacking raid, which ended up with Kelly claiming a 4-pointer. It was catching, Mick Gill adopting the kick and chase himself as South struck back in what was an entertaining first half. The visitors closing to within 2 points at the break, but they couldn't sustain it after half-time as Wyong went on to win by 20. After an early morning workout, a casual afternoon stroll was on the cards for Fastnet Rock. He was joined by the latest star of the stable, Stratum, who now features a Golden Slipper winning strut. It's a successful formula for the pair, who are both big chances in respective Group 1 events tomorrow at Randwick.
Couldn't be more happy with both. They've both done extremely well, and work's been good and they look terrific.
2 weeks after Fastnet Rock was beaten for the Triple Crown by the star Maralingi, Perry is hoping a return closer to home may do the trick against the Victorian-based galloper in the TJ Smith Stakes.
Probably if she's got a chink, maybe going our way, probably her form's not as good as what it is in Melbourne sort of thing. You know, it's sort of, I think it just swings his way a bit more tomorrow than what it did in Melbourne their last runs.
Stratum still kicking up his heels. After that great run last weekend, he has the 1400-metre Sires Produce Stakes to race tomorrow, where this multi-million-dollar 2-year-old will have plenty watching.
It's been quite a bit of interest over the phone, yeah, but that's, it's only early days with a horse like him.
As for the trainer himself, he's happy right where he is. Unlike others, he's resisted offers to relocate to either Melbourne or Sydney in recent years, as there's no taking Paul Perry out of Newcastle.
Yeah, I suppose you'd say that. It's a great place to live, and having all your family here and growing up here, and, I'm quite content, and it's a good place.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
It's been a hectic start to the Easter long weekend for Driver Reviver volunteers, a lineup of travellers making the wise decision to pull over.
It's been very busy since we've arrived. I'm not sure exactly how many people they've served, but we usually work it out by the number of cups used, and there's been quite a few thousand gone.
Police were also hard at work, one of the busiest days for the force, with the region's traffic volume tripling. But from all reports, it was flowing smoothly this afternoon.
Just gone straight through. It's been fantastic.
But it was a different story late yesterday. Traffic was bumper to bumper along the Pacific Highway near Karua and also at Rutherford on the New England Highway as people tried to leave early and make the most of their long weekend. The region's waterways were also buzzing with activity. Thousands headed to Lake Macquarie in the hope of catching their Good Friday fish. A public holiday, picturesque location and pleasant weather made the perfect combination. But the Maritime Authority is warning boat owners to act responsibly. With an increased number of craft on the water, they'll be checking safety equipment on about 100 boats each day.
We'll do a check that people have got all their correct safety gear, and most importantly their life jackets, and that they've got them in a position where if they need them they can get them readily.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Wave-wise, we had a big Wednesday this week, and for surfers, today really was a good Friday. With a light westerly blowing this morning, it couldn't have been a much better start to the Easter weekend for board riders.
Yeah, well, what we've seen now is the experienced surfers have had their days over the last couple of days, and now everyone can get out there and enjoy it, and especially around Meriwether Bar Beach stretch, there's good waves for the board riders.
Surfers weren't alone making the most of this morning's conditions, but with red meat off the menu for many, there were beachgoers working to catch more than just waves. Lifeguards are the ones really on duty this weekend. Strong rips forced the closure of Meriwether Beach this morning. With solid crowds enjoying the warm autumn days, unfortunately Easter has often been a bad time for drownings. Lifeguards have warned fierce winds and large swell earlier this week have shifted plenty of sand at local beaches.
All the beaches have had major changes to them, so exercise care and obey all the warning signs that are displayed on the beaches. And if the red and yellow flags are up, make sure you swim between them.
We'll take a complete look at the weather conditions expected for the next 3 days at 10 to 7. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
A lot's been said this week, but some final thoughts on John Hopewade. Manly made a stand to sack him after the judiciary inflicted a 17-week suspension for an elbow to the head of Keith Galloway. Coming into this year, Hopper was aware that he was on thin ice and his career couldn't withstand another major incident. In just 2 rounds, he was in hot water for abusing a ball boy and match officials, and now this. Bottom line, off the field, he is a good bloke and a family man, but reality is he just doesn't learn and the game can't sustain him any longer. Now, the Knights, they were banking on the return of Danny Badiris to ease their worries on the field after yesterday's news that injuries that he received in the Tri-Nations tour will now require surgery is a major blow. An operation to his shoulder and elbow will keep him sidelined for 6 weeks or longer. Now, while recovering from foot surgery, the question has been asked why these injuries weren't treated at the same time. Well, the decision was made to give those injuries a chance to heal with rest, but obviously it was the wrong decision. Great to see Michael Vella back at training after his battle with thyroid cancer. Now, he's been through radiation treatment, periods of isolation, and now the doctors are keeping a close eye on his energy levels while he's training. Now, all being well, we could see him back on the field halfway through the year. On to round 3's tips, and I reckon the Roosters will win tonight. Tomorrow, the Panthers and the Eels should get up, while on Sunday, the Storm, Cowboys and Bulldogs to win, and the Raiders should beat the Bunnies on Monday. Look, have a great Easter and a safe one, and I'll see you all next week.
Easter this year falls at a time when the world family is trying to recover from the fearful and devastating tsunamis in the Indian Ocean. And closer to home, we have been remembering the Maitland flood 50 years ago, a time of fear, loss of life and devastation. Usually the first words that rescue crews say when they come to the assistance of people is, "Don't be frightened," words of reassurance and comfort. When Jesus rises from the dead, he says to his friends the same, "Don't be frightened, I am with you." May this message sustain us in all our days.
Easter is a time that confronts us with suffering. This was brought home to me recently on a pilgrimage to Calcutta with 50 young Australians. There we saw the most appalling poverty and degradation and illness. But the message of Jesus on Good Friday is that he enters our degradation. He, in his abandonment, is the God of all who are abandoned. There's no track we have to tread in life that he doesn't go with us. May you know his joy and company this Easter. A happy Easter to you all.
Did you sleep in today? Big mistake. This was the Fishermen's Co-op at Wickham at 9 o'clock and again at 11 o'clock. The difference? In and out in 2 minutes or more than half an hour wait. Following last year's trends, prawns again proved a popular option for Good Friday lunch.
Easter time it's a lot of whole fish, but this year it's been fillets and prawns.
Huge seas meant many fish and prawn trawlers just couldn't get out of the harbour this week, leaving them high and dry for one of their busiest weeks of the year. Luckily, the men inside the river mouth came up with the goods.
Fortunately, the heavy rain has brought a lot of estuary fish down the rivers, so our estuary fishermen have really kept the shop going, which has been marvellous, yes.
After lunch, which many opted to eat outdoors, and that traditional afternoon tea, hundreds flocked to Easter Mass. The service at Sacred Heart Cathedral was well attended, with people of all ages putting time aside on the public holiday to remember the true meaning of Good Friday. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
It was always going to be a tough assignment for an undermanned South Newcastle team, but Captain Ben Donaldson got them off to a great start. But the Lions learnt the hard way it wasn't going to be a night to test the referee's patience, with Grant Coleman given a rest. Wyon captain Troy Pizzette led the home side's charge, sending Denny Somerville try-bound to wrestle back the lead. Rowan Kelly then sliced through South's right edge before combining with Matt Ross to extend the buffer to 6. A bit of luck doesn't hurt either, and the ball definitely bounced Wyong's way, not once, but twice in this attacking raid, which ended up with Kelly claiming a 4-pointer. It was catching, Mick Gill adopting the kick and chase himself as South struck back in what was an entertaining first half. The visitors closing to within 2 points at the break, but they couldn't sustain it after half-time as Wyong went on to win by 20.
The trucking industry revolves around delivering the most freight in the shortest possible time at the least cost. Because of the high expectations, fatigue is a common problem for truckies. WorkCover explained to industry parties in Newcastle today how it is pushing to amend OH&S legislation to ensure employers are working harder to prevent fatigue.
Truck drivers, like every other worker, has the right to undertake their duties in their course of employment and go home in a safe manner.
Proposed changes would require any operator of a heavy vehicle travelling more than 500 kilometres to have a fatigue management plan prepared by their employer. Also, for the first time, there would be an established chain of responsibility impacting on those dispatching and receiving goods.
And they have to be reasonable and ensure that they're not expecting the freight to be delivered in a time frame that puts the driver at risk of fatigue.
WorkCover hopes the move will help eliminate unrealistic deadlines, but union representatives say the proposed measures don't go far enough.
And when drivers are underpaid, they get to work too hard. They've got to try to make up the money, so they do the extra hours. And we think WorkCover has a role to make sure that people aren't being pushed too hard out there on the road because they're not being paid properly.
Public comment on the proposals close on April 15. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
It's been almost 2 years since the crash that claimed the life of a young father and a teenager. James Booth and a 14-year-old female died instantly when their Mitsubishi Pajero smashed into a rock wall on the F3 near Mount White and burst into flames just before midnight on the 1st of June 2003. Today, an inquest being heard by Deputy State Coroner Karl Milovanovich in Newcastle began examining just what happened in the days and hours leading up to the double fatality. A suppression order was placed on the identity of the teenager and her relationship with Mr Booth. A statement read to the court by Detective Senior Constable Tony Pillen from Gosford Police heard the F3 was wet the night of the crash. He also said it looks like the vehicle has driven off the road without braking. The court heard how the girl's mother spoke to her daughter just moments before the crash and said she sounded afraid, pleading with Mr Booth, "Please, please, please," before the phone dropped out. Passing motorists told police the driver of the Pajero was driving like an idiot and reached speeds of up to 150 kilometres an hour before hitting the rock wall. The inquest is expected to continue until Friday. Colleen West, NBN News.
This $12 million interchange will eventually cater for the new suburb of Wallara Peninsula near Swansea.
It will service our full development, both on the lakeside and the ocean side, which will total about 2,000 dwellings.
And yes, it's a privately funded venture. The estate's developers are paying for the interchange, considered a vital piece of infrastructure.
All of that design work has been done to RTA specifications, and all the work has been approved and accepted by the RTA.
6,000 people are expected to call Wallara Peninsula home over the next 15 years. Up the road at Tea Gardens and Hawke's Nest, however, the needs of local people are here and now. In 2001, 4,500 people were in the region over summer. That figure expected to rise over the next decade. So why do Tea Gardens and Hawke's Nest have to settle for an upgrade rather than a complete overhaul of a notorious T intersection linking their access road and the Pacific Highway? Could the state government be accused of putting a price on safety? The towns don't have the luxury of a private backer, but locals campaigning for an overpass say it's long overdue. The RTA, however, hasn't budged and is set to go ahead with the original option, which is due for completion by mid-next year. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
The day after, and little had changed for Joshua Ross. Still garbed in his gift-winning gear, you couldn't blame the nation's leading sprinter for not wanting the feeling to fade.
Phenomenal. I'm proud just to be a part of it, and the second man ever to win off scratch and the first Australian, I might add, so it's very special to me.
In what was the race that launched his career 2 years ago when he won as a virtual no-name, Ross returned to do what no other Australian had done before in the 120-metre feature. With the World Championships in Helsinki fast approaching and Melbourne's Commonwealth Games to follow, he's predicting only bigger things lay on the horizon.
That's the exciting part. I don't know what I'm capable of, and I think haven't even touched the surface of what I'm capable of achieving.
And Ross hasn't forgotten where it all began. He'll return to the Central Coast on Saturday, where his athletics career started, to support a race named in honour of his first coach, the late Jerry Thomas.
It depends how my body pulls up. A bit sore at the moment, but yeah, I'll be there anyway, whether supporting the gift or running it.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. Running for the first time since the match against Canberra a week ago, Andrew Johns and Matthew Gidley are racing the clock to be ready to rope in the Cowboys. To have a further scan tomorrow on a glute muscle tear, at least the skipper knows the source of his injury. Gidley still to pinpoint the exact problem affecting his groin.
Trained the whole off-season without missing, a session, and then, getting a bit of a niggly injury this time of the year is always a bit upsetting.
Both will have to pass fitness tests, with the touring party north taking no passengers.
I made it fairly clear after the game
against Canberra in respect to players carrying injuries into games, that if they couldn't perform at the acceptable level, that I'd rather than not play them.
The coach has welcomed veteran forward Craig Smith with open arms though. Despite sporting a limited preparation, the former Dragon figures there's no time like the present.
I'm excited again, you know. I'd probably take a few years off my age, this sort of stuff, so might add a couple too, so you never know. But yeah, it's a challenge for me and I'm looking forward to that challenge.
Smith will start his first game for Newcastle off the bench to support a reshaped forward pack, while Brad Tyre retained a spot in the starting side after his promising debut.
Your home crowd's the best crowd you can get in the world. You know, there's a lot of fans there and a lot of people that just want to see us winning.
Uniting Care purchased this land at Ellamore Vale in 1999 with plans to develop it into an aged care facility. There was one problem though. The land was rezoned environmental investigation in 2003, prohibiting seniors housing. It seems council has had a change of heart, last night agreeing to the development of an aged care centre on the site.
The next step from here, once the Minister signs the rezoning, is to actually put the bulldozers on the site.
Under the plan, residents from the ageing Courtman Hall Hostel in Newcastle and Wesley Lodge Nursing Home in Mayfield will be relocated to the $20 million facility. It will include 108 high and low care beds and will come with all the mod cons you could expect to find in a motel, including internet access and an in-house movie system.
So they have a wide range of entertainment they can look at and not have to leave their own room.
There'll also be a hairdressing salon, a library, a gymnasium and a chapel incorporated into the facility. Tenders have already gone out for the project, which is expected to be given the final stamp of approval from Council in May.
A roadwork zone on Nelson Bay Road was the scene of the crash just after 6:30 this morning. On a stretch of wet road, police say a tip truck travelling north, driven by a 46-year-old Charlestown man, crossed into the path of a Newcastle-bound car and collided head-on. Emergency services rushed to Fullerton Cove, but there was little ambulance officers could do for the 57-year-old car driver from Mallabula who was trapped in the wreckage.
A person has died at the scene, and one passenger has been conveyed from that vehicle to the John Hunt Hospital for treatment to injuries.
The second victim, the driver's 24-year-old son, is reported to be in a critical condition with head injuries. Nelson Bay Road had to be closed for around 6 hours while crash investigation police made inquiries into the cause of the accident and for the scene to be cleared. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Our deepest sympathies go to the family and friends at this time. And we'll continue with the investigation and put it before the coroner and see if we can make some sense of a very tragic circumstance.
It was always going to be a tough assignment for an undermanned South Newcastle team, but Captain Ben Donaldson got them off to a great start. But the Lions learnt the hard way it wasn't going to be a night to test the referee's patience, with Grant Coleman given a rest. Wyon captain Troy Pizzette led the home side's charge, sending Denny Somerville try-bound to wrestle back the lead. Rowan Kelly then sliced through South's right edge before combining with Matt Ross to extend the buffer to 6. A bit of luck doesn't hurt either, and the ball definitely bounced Wyong's way, not once, but twice in this attacking raid, which ended up with Kelly claiming a 4-pointer. It was catching, Mick Gill adopting the kick and chase himself as South struck back in what was an entertaining first half. The visitors closing to within 2 points at the break, but they couldn't sustain it after half-time as Wyong went on to win by 20.
This is not your average boat delivery, unloading a luxury pleasure craft from a cargo ship. Then again, this craft isn't your average boat. The American-designed, Taiwanese-built offshore motor yacht is a long-distance cruising craft with the lot.
Up on the flybridge, you've got a barbecue area and a big flybridge where you can put a big rubber ducky if you want to, but in their case they're not. And then we're downstairs, we've got a saloon, galley up actually in the pilot house. So in this particular case, we've got a plasma screen TV that pops up and down out of a cupboard and, you know, all the goodies.
The 21-metre vessel is in Newcastle for work at Noakes Shipyard. Over the next 2 months, it'll undergo quality assurance checks, final fit-out and commissioning before the overseas owners sail the Pacific.
The owner said to me was that we want a boat that his wife and he can operate. She actually drives the boat and he's the decky, would you believe? But that's great. So we've done everything you can do to make it simple for her.
It's the second vessel Sydney firm Offshore Marine Technology and international logistics services company Schenker have imported into Newcastle, with another 3 to come. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Having made it through training yesterday, this morning, and a final fitness test on his glute muscle injury this afternoon, Andrew Johns was given the all clear for tomorrow's trip to North Queensland. While Coach Hagan made it clear he wouldn't take half-fit players, Matthew Gidley was also given the green light for Saturday's match after being in doubt with a groin problem. Meantime, the Knights' star hooker could rejoin the side earlier than expected. Danny Badiris had surgery on both his shoulder and elbow yesterday. Today, the Knights said the procedure went very well. As a result, he could be ready to play in 4 weeks' time rather than the 6 weeks originally predicted. And the Knights are hoping science may be able to help with that now infamous injury toll. Newcastle physios are among a handful in the NRL to try the Galileo, an innovative whole-body vibration machine used in player rehab. In theory, for players like David Siege, who's recovering from a knee reconstruction, the vibrations stimulate the muscles and tendons, helping them to regain strength and flexibility faster.
The results have been very surprisingly quick. You know, even though we've only had it for a week, a lot of the guys have been able to do things they haven't been able to do within a couple of days, which is surprising and very pleasing.
The knee feels a lot better. You know, just after being on that machine 3 times.
Graham Swanson calls it playing trains, but there's nothing make-believe about this hobby. Three years ago, the retired pilot rescued a rusting rickety cane locomotive from a farm shed in central Queensland. It was the birth of Lake Macquarie Light Rail, a real working shrine to steam, all in Graham's backyard.
Because everybody's got to have a train set, so I just decided mine to be a little bit bigger.
And there's just something about steam. For some, it's nostalgic. For others, something of a novelty.
It's pretty nice with the steam.
It's fun when you go over the bridge and when you get the steam in your face.
But there's one common effect. It sure makes you want to wave. Today, Graham is entertaining the folks from a vintage car club, allowing others to share his super-sized train set by invitation only.
I have just as much pleasure in seeing everybody else enjoy it. But the buzz is, it's a steam locomotive and I get to play with it.
And he has a team of fellow steam enthusiasts to help. The volunteers get together twice a week. They've built all this in a few short years.
We only steam occasionally, so it's great to see the loco steaming, and that's our reward, plus the people come along and enjoy it.
It's amazing to think that just 3 years ago, this was a simple horse paddock. It's now a functioning railway, keeping the magic of steam alive. And Graham and the gang aren't finished yet. Yes, another neglected loco in desperate need of the kind of TLC only true train buffs can give.
Big boys and their toys, yeah, no trouble.
I'm hoping that when I fall off my perch, that it'll either go to a museum or someone will take on what I've started and keep the steam alive.
It's a busy road at the best of times, but today Tomago Road between Hexham and Williamtown was choked. Traffic was brought to a standstill as motorists travelling between Port Stephens and Newcastle were diverted around the Fullerton Cove crash scene. The Pacific Highway was also affected at the Tomago turnoff, while traffic was slowed to a crawl along Maitland Road at Sandgate and Hexham. The problems compounded by a second crash near the Hexham Bowling Club.
The police had no other option basically to put, other than the diversions that were already being put in place along Cabbage Tree Road and turning the motorists around at the end of Kooragang Island.
Around 20,000 motorists travel between Port Stephens and Newcastle each day along Nelson Bay Road, but with it out of action, alternate routes were found wanting.
It's all down to funding. I mean, if the state government would like to make another crossing of, say, Tilligary Creek, we'd have 2 ways in and out of Port Stephens.
Port Stephens Council has been lobbying the state government to widen Nelson Bay Road into dual carriageway since 1995. Councillor Craig Bowman says 4 people have now lost their lives on Nelson Bay Road at Fullerton Cove in the last 6 months.
Obviously, if it was a 4-lane highway with a median strip, the chances of a head-on are very much reduced.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Surf god Huey must be saving the best for the big guns in the Energy Australia Pro because he certainly wasn't shining down on the lineup in the Indigenous Classic today. Competitors showed incredible patience in the sloppy 1-metre waves, with many of the earlier heats offering next to nothing. It's expected the swell will pick up over the next couple of days, but it will remain onshore and messy for the pro team grommets until the weekend.
Maybe we might see the swell around the 2-metre mark by Thursday afternoon, Friday morning a little bit bigger, and then dropping a bit to be clean for the finals on Saturday and Sunday, I hope.
In the meanwhile, it was Foster's Haddon family stealing the show in the Koori Classic. Winning the women's event for the past 3 years, 17-year-old Lara Haddon must have scared off the competition. She was the only female entrant and opted to mix it with the boys. Lara made it all the way to the semis, where she met her brother and number 1 seed Joe Haddon. His wave selection was impeccable, and pointing his sister in the right direction, so too were his manners. 21-year-old Joe went on to take out the title. No doubt Mum will be proud.
It was alright, he was being pretty nice to me. He's like, go this way, Lara. Yeah, he was really nice, so it was alright.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
There were 124 fatal crashes involving semi-trailers in the last 12 months on Australian roads. And while an efficient and reliable transport system is vital to the Trucking Association, helping to cut the carnage is just as important.
As the road is our workplace, we as an industry are looking for a safer workplace, and at the end of the day we want to become an industry that has no accidents, a tall ask.
Federal Transport Minister John Anderson says heavy vehicle safety reforms are needed, focusing on speed, fatigue and safety checks. But he believes improving the road network is the ultimate solution. He's proposing tolls to fast-track work on building dual carriageway from Hexham to the Queensland border.
And then everyone wins. We get the infrastructure earlier, the industry gets savings, it's safer.
The trucking industry says they're already paying their way, with 20 cents a litre in road user tax as part of the fuel excise.
A fair percentage of it goes into general revenue, and it doesn't go into infrastructure. And I think it's unfair that we should be then expected to pay for a toll on infrastructure.
Pay is also an issue. Drivers are pushing themselves to deliver more freight in the shortest possible time to earn more money, but that's contributing to driver fatigue and crashes.
I don't believe they do get paid enough money for what they do.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Within minutes, emergency crews had arrived at the scene, but the fire had spread quickly.
Everyone was out the front yelling and screaming, but it was just like terrible. There was smoke everywhere, couldn't see nothing.
Run out the back to try and help, and we just saw everyone crying and that.
An ambulance officer's worst dream, really, confronted with half the family on the outside, saying that the other half were on the inside.
The bodies of 2 boys, 9-year-old Matthew and Shane Davies, who would have turned 6 on Saturday, were discovered soon after. They were found in a bathroom at the rear of the house. It appears the older boy had tried to shield his younger brother from the flames. Mother Lynette and her 3 other young children had managed to escape without serious injuries.
They'd suffered from smoke inhalation and some minor burns. Obviously they were very traumatised by what was going on.
As the news spread around the community, there was an outpouring of grief. Neighbours comforted each other and the boy's father, who raced to the scene from his Tillara home. Friends of the family described Matthew and Shane as nice, friendly boys.
I've played with them down here. I'm real close to their sister. We're all good friends. And then today this happened.
There's no indication how the fire started, and detectives are preparing a report for the coroner. It's the second tragic event in the Hunter Valley in as many weeks. Earlier this month, an entire young family was lost in a triple murder-suicide. The strain well and truly felt by the region's police, fire and ambulance officers.
No doubt very, very traumatic for the family and the communities, but also for the emergency services as well.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Sex sells, but not here. In Merriwa, the local pharmacy refuses to carry condoms on ethical grounds. It's been that way for years, and while the pharmacist wasn't in today when we called, there were plenty of locals leaping to his defence. He even has the Health Minister's backing.
He's perfectly within his rights to decide not to carry certain items.
But don't think that condom is a dirty word in Merriwa. Everyone, it seems, knows where you can buy them.
You can buy all these condoms down there, down here, and I also believe that they used to hand them out at the youth centre.
The supermarket right next door is well stocked, so why would an American sex shop step in? But 6,000 of them? Merriwa locals are frankly a little bewildered by it all, but it has made for some spicy talk at the local pub.
Well, as long as they send some women out with them, we'll be right. But there's not much use for 6,000 in Merriwa.
Bring them and make them bigger. The condoms, I mean.
The American company is entrusting its unusual gift to the local mayor, Barry Rose, who, while describing the donation as completely unnecessary, says he will pass it on to the people of Merriwa. And if there isn't really a need for so many condoms, the inventive locals are bound to find another use.
Knowing the kids in East Town, they'll just blow them up and hang them off the windows in the cars, so I wouldn't bother.
Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
He's been there in times of crisis and times of jubilation. Someone who fronts the media when questions need answering and the figurehead of a club board. But as Michael Hill will tell you, that's the job of a club chairman and one he's vacating after a decade at the top.
10 years at the top of that board is a long time, and I thought that there were people within the board who could do the job, and it was time for them to have a chance.
He insists the Bathurst scandal had nothing to do with his decision to step aside and strongly denies claims there is a rift among the board of directors.
We've got a lot of responsibility, and you would expect disputation and argument, and we have that, but we're all united in the one thing.
The absence of a major sponsor still haunts the club and will no doubt be among the first items of business for the new chairman with the election process underway.
Newcastle has lived since its inception from hand to mouth, and that's given the club a certain toughness.
2 premierships among his fondest memories.
He'll leave with his head held high, and all the players know what he's done for the club and really appreciate it.
Hill says apart from spending more time on the golf course, he'll remain a board member.
Have you ever seen Year 7 students so quiet, so still, so attentive? It's unlikely, because the items they're also focused on haven't been in Australia for long. They're moon rocks, samples collected from the moon's surface during 3 different Apollo missions, and they're worth $7 million. That's why they're kept under serious lock and key at all times.
They're normally kept in the drug safe at the police station. That way they need 2 different keys to open up the safe in order to get them out.
Maitland High science teacher Jeanette Rothethel is responsible for the rocks, but she's more than happy to share them with students.
Just to have that in the classroom as a kind of stimulus for them enables them to be more motivated to science in general. So it's not just for the understanding of the moon.
The rocks are certainly helping teach a lunar lesson that all things on the moon are not big and blue.
I say to them not to be unimpressed by their size, not to be over-impressed by their value, but to be impressed by the fact that they're holding something from the moon.
And it seems to be working.
It's not every day that you get to, it's not every day that bits of the moon are in your hands in the classroom.
Too right.
No stuffy suits today for Tony Abbott. Instead, the rather cool comfort of lycra and the open road. It's the 8th time he's led the Poly Pedal, and it's no easy ride, even for a seasoned Canberra combatant.
You feel physically exhausted after a day on the road, but you can feel psychically exhausted after a day in Parliament.
The peddling pollies and their large team of supporters rode into Jerry's Plains today on day 2 of the 1,000-kilometre trek around New South Wales. As well as raising money for leukaemia research at Sydney's Westmead Hospital, the event gives the politicians a chance to take in the rural scenery and any local concerns.
To get out of the suits and the offices and the schedules and try to see people on their turf rather than ours.
The riders are in Muswellbrook tonight and tomorrow head to Quirindi. By the time they return to Sydney in just over a week's time, they hope to have raised around $100,000. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
It's true what they say, things look much brighter when the sun indeed shines. A week of inclement weather made organisers a little unsure of Surfest's popularity, but after day 1, no complaints.
We've seen a lot of the 15 and 16-year-olds out there this morning. A couple of them, like Julian Wilson from Queensland, top scoring for the day and really showing the internationals how it's done.
19-year-old Dylan Graves from Puerto Rico was keeping a close eye on competition. The highly rated South American junior scoring an impressive 15.9 for his 2 rides this morning.
I didn't really have a certain strategy. I just kind of went out there and was looking for waves.
Many of the juniors here also qualify for next week's Open. Both competitions being back-to-back, part of the appeal.
The Australasian Pro Junior Series basically mirrors the WQS format for 21 and under surfers, so if they can get through heats in the Pro Junior and Pro Teen, then they're almost guaranteed of success in the WQS at a later stage.
And if you find yourself at Surfest this year, it's more than likely you'll be interviewed by members from the Hunter Valley Research Foundation. The staff, in the red shirts, will be asking a range of questions to find out the economic benefits the event brings to the region.
Out of hospital, Danny Badiris can now get on with the business of rugby league, now planning to make his much-anticipated return.
I couldn't really do much about it with my foot being the way it was, and by the time I started a bit of physical stuff, it wasn't up to scratch. So I'll start the year on a fresh slate and hopefully get 20-odd games in.
Foot, shoulder and elbow surgery kept pushing his starting date back. Club officials were expecting a 6-week layoff, but it now turns out they won't be waiting that long.
3 to 4 weeks, hopefully I'll get back, something like a Canterbury game at home or something like that might be something I can pinpoint.
A State of Origin stalwart, Badiris is likely to miss this year's Anzac Test, a small price to pay if it means making a full recovery. Badiris says he'll start training next week, a welcome sight for the Newcastle Knights faithful and just the tonic for a club thirsting for some good news.
Hopefully the fans are still solid and sticking behind us, that things will turn around, and given it'll take a bit of luck, that we should be make the semis.
Many would have thought two-time world champion Damien King would have featured in the final, but he headlined a list of big names who failed to reach the decider. Teenage French star Pierre-Louis Costas was favoured in the small surf, but the title was taken out by Warner's Bay boy John Cruikshank, who made the most of local conditions. In the women's final, meanwhile, Queensland Kira Llewellyn was too strong and got the judges' nod. From boards to bikes, and the Australian Endurance Series began at Barley Ranch today. An event which relies as much on pace as it does self-preservation, National 250 champ Damien Smith knew he had a battle on his hands early.
A little bit nervous and didn't relax like I should have, but you know, as you do more laps, you get more relaxed at it.
A taxing day for both bike and rider. Any lapse in concentration can prove costly. Queenslander AJ Roberts was the one who set the early pace, winning the first of 5 time trials today by a massive 13 seconds. Round 2 will be raced tomorrow.
You can't get much clearer than this, and whether you're polite about it or sick of being nice, the message remains the same. Around 1,000 residents today paraded down the main street of Tea Gardens, showing their outrage at the Carr government's reluctance to build an overpass into the area.
The people, the town, are united behind the idea that we do need an overpass.
This is the intersection that's causing the furore. While the Kurua to Bulladila upgrade is being completed, a T intersection will be built here. Residents say an overpass is a safer option and will save lives.
It's going to kill people, and until Mr Costa can understand that, we have to maintain the pressure on him.
The residents are giving Mr Costa 2 weeks to agree to a public meeting on the issue. If he declines, they say they'll move their protest to Sydney.
We're going to get buses and we're going to go down to Macquarie Street, and we're not talking the rent-a-crowd type people, we're talking about the grandmas, the grandpas, the people living here who want to get down there and let him know how important it is.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.